This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by Prize Picks. Coming at you Friday morning. It's March. It's March 1st. And because it's March 1st, I figured we kind of use this episode as a sort of reflection of February. Obviously, the Wolves play the Kings this evening. They play the Clippers on Sunday. We're not going to have a pod until after both of these games. Hopefully, this is kind of an episode you can listen to anytime over this weekend. But I think February was a pretty important bounce back month for this team because January was tough. It was set up to be tough. It was a slog. It was road heavy. It's right before the break. They only went 10-7 in that time, which is still a very good record, but comparatively to the other months, not as good. I thought in February they looked more like the early season Wolves. Another month they logged the best defense in the NBA, and February was their best offensive month of the season. I got Kyle Teige here with me for the Friday pod. Kyle, we'll get into this and other things around the Wolves for a weekend pod. How are you?
I'm good. We were saying before this, we haven't done a pod in a while, right? It's kind of because we did like 5 pods that week of the Portland series.
Yeah.
It kind of felt like, remember back in the day when you'd stay at like a buddy's house all weekend, and then you're like, oh, we're sick of each other. We're not even gonna like talk in school for like a week. So I think that was you and I. We haven't really talked much.
I think that was an all-star break. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, maybe. Okay, that too. Yeah, my mother-in-law was in town.
Maybe you did. Maybe you were sick of me. I don't know.
But no, I was just kind of laying in bed last night looking at February because it felt like a slog. It felt like a grind. January is more of a grind, I think, in the NBA post-Christmas. But February can be a grind too, especially when you mix in like a trade deadline and an all-star break. But the Wolves, like, I don't know, have you looked at their schedule for February? Like, I don't think they ever lost by more than 5 points. And like the games they lost were all like, they choked against the Magic, or I was pulling it up right now, like they choked against the Magic at home. They choked that Bulls game away. Then they kind of beat everyone else. They choked that Bucks game. Like, they pretty much had their best month of basketball in February. Yeah. And that was highlighted by Ant, who's not going to win Western Conference Player of the Month because Luka's numbers are video game-like, but I think he averaged like 31 points in February, which is the only other person to do that in franchise history was Kevin Love. So really good month. They've 8-2 in their last 10. They haven't lost by double digits since January 3rd. They haven't lost 3 games in a row since March 2023. I mean, it continues to be like all this random stuff of like, I've never seen this before. So yeah, you wake up this morning and they're 42-17 and they have a full game lead on the Thunder now after the Thunder fell in one of the best regular season games I've ever seen last night against Wemby.
Yeah, I didn't watch it last night, but I like
you should have to pay to watch that. Like, that's like premier subscription stuff. That was insane.
I'm gonna have to check that out. But I definitely got like a bunch of texts like, are you watching Chet and Wemby right now? And I will have to watch out. But that is big from the Wolves' perspective of the Thunder, falling. It's kind of like a reminder for the Wolves whenever they are able to beat a good team or not lose to a bad team, whatever. Like, it is going to be tight here the rest of the way for all these teams. Obviously, the Nuggets are coming too, and I really think that's probably going to be the Wolves' battle for the one. But I really like. I am kind of on the cliche of like, competing with yourselves, right? Can you become a better version of yourself? Can you be the more consistent team? The things you hear the Nuggets, saying too. I think the 1 seed matters in the conference, but what matters to me most, or what will give me most confidence in the Wolves, is that they continue to make like the small strides in the areas that they, have somewhat held them back in a great season, right? And that's why I've just kind of been saying I don't know how far I'm going to project the Wolves to go, but it's going to be in the playoffs. But it's going to be pretty directly correlated to how this offense fares, how over the last 20 some games of the season, and how rare the Orlando games are, the Chicago games are that we're talking about there. Just if they have another one of them, it doesn't mean they're screwed and they're not going to go anywhere, but can that feel less and less like a part of their identity? And can the offense get better and better? And that happened in February. If you just go through November 15th in offense, December 19th in offense, January 15th in offense, doesn't seem like a huge difference, but February they were 11th. That's the range, right?
Yeah.
Can you be top 10, low end of that? I think that matters a lot. We were talking about this in Portland a ton. It's pretty much just as simple as not turning the ball over as much. And that's what happened. November 25th in turnovers, December 30th in turnovers, January 27th. And then February, they get up to 17th. And it's like they shot worse. Their shooting numbers were worse in February. But just those extra possessions and not giving, the team the ball makes a huge difference. And just being able to kind of dominate a game end to end or not fall back by 15 points. They're becoming a more mature version of a young team. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that is what the progression was always going to have to be. You were going to always have a team where your best player was 22, one of your most important defensive players was 23, your probably most important player off the bench was 24, and Keel's 20. I mean, it's a young team that was going to be fighting immaturity issues over the course of the year, and they have. I think that's what is starting, to show up, and of course, it's about sustaining that.
Yeah, that whole conversation of the 1 seed, it's like important in one vein. I know Jace is kind of tracking it because there's only so many games left, right? Like the Wolves wake up today and they're first in the West. They're a game clear of OKC, 1.5 games clear of Denver. But the biggest one to me is that they're 7 games clear of the Suns for the 5 seed. Like you are probably a week or so away, outside of an apocalyptic collapse. Like you're about a week away from like clinching home court in the first round, so again, back to the 1 seed, it's really only important if like, what are your goals, right? Now we're starting to see this thing last and be sustainable for so many months and so many games that you're like, just winning one playoff series, despite not doing it for 20 years, probably shouldn't be the goal, right? Like the West is wide open. I do think Denver is kind of back to being Denver. So I wouldn't say the Wolves are the favorites in the West, but it's pretty open. And if you can avoid, if you can be 1-2 in the standings in any order, and avoid Denver in the first or second round, that'd be great. But yeah, if your goal is, hey, why can't, when like Portland did that one season, why can't we just make a run in a Western Conference? Then the 1 seed's really important because, I mean, they're 22-6 at home. I think outside of maybe Boston, who's 27-3, that's the best mark in the league. So you want to play as many games at home as possible, cut down on travel, all that stuff. So it's going to be kind of a sprint to the finish line, like you've been saying pretty much all week. But I also agree with you that the only team that they should be looking at in the standings is themselves, because this team has shown you, yes, they are becoming a more mature young team, but they still have immaturity that leaks through. And if they start looking, I mean, Ant said it himself when he was in Portland, like, I have no idea what the standings are. He doesn't know a lot of things. He's like, I just kind of come here and do my job. But as long as they keep focused on just trying to win all these games at home, they came out of the break, it was a little stale, but they haven't lost yet. So they're going to continue to grind this 7-game home.
No, they lost to Milwaukee. They lost the first.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't count that, though, because it was so late for me. But and then they go on. I think they have one more nasty little road trip coming up. It's like spans like 10 or so days, and that'll be a challenge too, right? When you get comfortable at home. So they couldn't be in a better spot as they enter March. And that's a weird thing to say because usually March 1st, when you send me this recording link, it's like, all right, so who are we breaking down in the draft? And I don't know who's in the draft. I know it's a bad one, but these next, how many games do they have left? 42, 23?
Yeah.
I think they probably got to win 15 of those games to keep the 1 seed.
I think this weekend is interesting. Kings and Clippers,
two playoff teams for sure.
Right. And they do play better against teams that they, feel are more of a challenge. I guess we'll see how much they treat the Kings as that, but we know how they played against the Clippers throughout this season. And I think it's an opportunity again at home. It's not a back-to-back. The Kings game, I guess the Clippers game is the front end of a back-to-back, but if they take care of business in those 2 games, easier said than done. Again, I think those are 2 good teams. I wouldn't sleep on the Kings either, but now to your kind of like Phoenix point, I think you do that. You've pushed yourself up into, now we're pretty sure this is a 1 or 2 seed in the Western Conference. They get Portland on the back end of the back-to-back against the Clippers, which was interesting. That's what happened when they played the Clippers last time, right? They got the Clippers on the front end, and then they got the Blazers on the back end of that 2 weeks ago too. It's a nice little gift there in the schedule. So take care of the Kings, take care of the Clippers. It is the Blazers. Then on Monday, if you can win all three of those, then you go into that road trip, which is tough. It's an Indiana Cleveland back-to-back, right? Followed up by a trip to LA for a game against the Clippers and Lakers. There is some importance to taking care of business, I think, over the course of this weekend into Monday, so as to stay up there. Because like we said, I don't think the Nuggets are really going away. The Thunder and Clippers have like waxed and waned a little bit, but the point is if you fumble a little bit, if any of those teams fumble, Wolves included, you look at the standings, even if you started at 1 at the beginning of the week, you might be at 3 or 4 at the end of it. So it's just about kind of continuing and sustaining. And bizarrely, I almost feel more confident about their ability to do that when I say Kings and Clippers on the schedule coming up, almost more so than I do Spurs and Grizzlies, just because you feel like you're going to get that effort, right?
I don't know exactly what the sport is called, but like late night or early mornings in the summer on ESPN when they do like the outdoorsy competitions and the guys chop down the logs and like they insert the thing in and then they go, like the lumberjack goes up a level now. That's kind of what the Wolves just have to do, right? I mean, you've worked so hard, and they have, to get to 42-17. Their longest losing streak of the season has been 2 games. That stuff too is like ties into, that's a pretty mature group. Even when they are immature, if they never, you've coined the term let go of the rope, they've never even, if the rope slips a little bit, they pull it back. So as long as, because you were talking about that little West Coast kind of road trip where it starts in Indiana, but then Lakers, Clippers, then it's 2 against the Jazz in Utah. And then that second Jazz game, they fly back home and play the Nuggets of all teams the next night. And then this Clippers game on Sunday is a matinee game. And back to the immaturity, like I know these guys, especially with all of them starting to be fathers, like they love their naps, and that's they never show up for those early games, right? So one game at a time.
Well, the Clippers either, like it's to whatever extent it's a matinee. I don't know, you have that lax sort of start to them as they often are. I'm not really expecting like Kawhi and Paul George and James Harden to come out like guns blazing at 2 p.m.
What time are clubs open till on Saturday night in Minneapolis?
Nothing's open late.
Okay, so then James Harden will be well rested.
There's maybe some places James Harden could go that are open.
But it after a couple, the Spurs are fun. It's so cool to watch Wemby right now. Just 10 seconds, like he is like a top 20 player in the league, and they're probably a 4 seed moving forward every year if they make one smart transaction. But you can only pick apart so much watching Grizzlies games and Spurs games and Portland Trailblazers games. I thought you did a really good preview for the Kings game that's tonight. You did a pod yesterday with Brandon. I want to see them play real teams that are also kind of hungry and fighting. The Clippers have slid a little bit, now down to 4, 5-5 in their last 10, but it takes 1 week for them to kind of figure it out too. So we're back to meaningful games that I think you'll be able to dissect in the coming weeks. And it starts again tonight against a Kings team that, after your preview yesterday, I feel like would be a pretty good matchup for the Wolves if it was 1-8.
Yeah, I do too, but also interesting to the dissecting point of it, of like, I mean, so you listen to it, like the things I kind of got into with that is like, all right, I think Sabonis can theoretically be pretty difficult matchup for Gobert to guard, right? That's more the isolation, less of the like just strict rim protection for Gobert. Fox is fast. We'll see if he's playing in this game. The Kings really play passing lanes. Are going to try and generate turnovers, that sort of thing. I mean, and I liked seeing that. And I think you like seeing, like, if you're the Wolves, you like seeing that because it's an opportunity to like stomp out some of the lingering concerns you might have of your team, or like be able to be like, yeah, we have had turnovers issues in the past, or we have had trouble, chasing shooters with our power forwards. Cat's going to need to chase around Harrison Barnes, or Nas is going to have to chase Kevin Huerter or something like that. I think what sucks about like the Grizzlies game is all, like, when you're playing them, all it can really do in that game is like confirm some negative biases that you have, right? You take care of the Grizzlies and you stay kind of where you are, right? And that's just life as a really good team in the NBA. You don't get a ton of credit for, beating bad teams, even though it's important. They count in the standings. It's going to push you towards that top seed. It's interesting for me, and I think it's more interesting for them to really be able to stress test themselves against other playoff teams that present challenges. The Kings too, like the Kings and the Clippers, kind of putting that all together, are able to, if we made the list of like, oh, these are things we're a little, insecure about with the Wolves, you can point to the Clippers and Kings being able to kind of poke at all of those things. But poking doesn't mean they're going to be broken by it, because they haven't been broken by the Clippers this season. Let's see how small ball more of that works or whatever. And then they did beat the Kings last time they played without Cat. I think that's going to be interesting tonight. The one time Cat played against the Kings, they did lose, but these are the games you mark on your calendar, and you're like, all right, I'm not just watching the Wolves to see if they can sustain. I'm watching the Wolves to see like, oh yeah, they beat this team, and now I'm even higher on them. Looking forward, and those are the most fun games.
Yeah, I just keep looking at the standings. As a Minnesota sports fan or a Minnesota Timberwolves fan, it's also, I don't know if there's any team I want to play, right? Like, I would just love if the Wolves could get the 1 seed, and then it's like March Madness where you play like some D3 school from Indiana. But if you do have to play someone in the first round, which I think they do, like the Kings and the Mavericks are the teams that would be on my radar more than, I don't know why, probably just the rain, the tendonitis, the Timberwolves scar tissue. I just don't want to play the Lakers or the Warriors, because those teams have done it before and probably get a good whistle and probably have the better player in the series. So I think tonight with the Kings would be a really good matchup. Obviously, the Wolves and Clippers wouldn't face off in the first round unless things went south for the Clippers. But that's another one where it's like those styles are so contrasting, right? Because the Clippers are totally cool. They love Zubac, but like they can just play 5 out and try to do to Rudy what was done to Rudy in a different iteration of the Clippers back in the day that kind of tarnished his resume or his perception around the league. Yeah. So yeah, it used to be fun to just chalk up wins. I mean, again, they sit here today at 42-17. Last year they were 42-40, right? Like that's a pretty crazy leap. And to do it, which I think is the coolest thing, it's the same 8 guys, right? It's the same coach. You rarely see in sports now, with all the pressure to win and all the outside noise of like, if an experiment doesn't work, you change the experiment or you tweak the experiment. And the Wolves, for better or worse, just ran it back with the same rotation, same coaching staff, and just tweaked parts of the experiment internally rather than externally. And it's led to them being, I think they're on pace to win 59 games now, which would surpass the 03-04 team that won 58 games. So yeah, just keep winning games, keep kind of asserting yourself, and probably don't show too much. That was one thing I think Britt said after the last time they played the Clippers. It's like, well, do you think Ty Lue showed his hand? That's another thing, too, is like, if you see them lose to the Clippers, you're like, why didn't they put Ant on Kawhi more or something? Like, maybe you save some of those cards for April. Like, you don't want to show all your stuff now in March. So just do what you do, integrate some guys, maybe get Jaden. I listened to you all week. You had a Jaden McDaniels segment with everyone this week except me. But get Jaden into it a little more, keep guys fresh. I think they've been kind of cutting Mike Conley's minutes down a little bit. I mean, Monty Morris, Jack Borman had this, but I think Monty Morris has a 21 assists and 1 turnover in his last 7 games. That seems pretty good. So just, find guys rest when you can. I like that Rudy set out that one night. I love, Carl's was personal, but find moments to give a guy a rest, give a guy a break, keep the offense humming. I think 11th is totally fine when your defense is, as you always say, like first with a bullet. So see how far you can push that along. Try to avoid injuries, knock on wood, and see where you are on, April 10th.
I want to do more on the 42 wins thing. Let's do a segment on that, but let's grab our ad break here. And it's been a month, Kyle, but we get to talk about English muffins again. Yeah.
Let's go.
StoneandSkillet.com. Honestly, I think Eggs Benedict is my favorite food. If there's like one, you're like, okay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, everybody likes like pizza and stuff like that, but English muffins, one of my favorite foods. And it was so funny when Stone and Skillet reached out to me to do this. I was like, and I have your English muffins in my kitchen right now. They sent us like a whole big pack around Christmas, and you got some too. They're English muffins. They're an indulgence, whatever. But these are just, if you're going to indulge in an English muffin in the morning, like make it be a good one. And actually, this is a healthier one. There's actually protein, 6 grams of protein in Stone and Skillets, non-GMO certified. It's it's these are the fun sort of things to kind of sponsor, because I just like them. I like having a product that I really enjoy, and I know we both like. When we met with Cam at Stone and Skillet, just we like their story as well. Stoneandskillet.com for 20% off in order. You can use promo code Dane to get that 20% off when you're there. Otherwise, they are at Whole Foods as well. They're kind of a startup business themselves. I mean, they've been going for about 10 years, but are really expanding. So it's a good business to support, and they're a business that supports us. So we hope that you consider Stone and Skillet's English muffins. Do you miss them, Kyle? Can you get them? I don't know if you.
I can't get them in store, so I got to order them online.
Okay.
So I got to reach out to Cam and maybe get one of those treasure chest boxes again. But it is like, honestly, I think that was most of the reason I logged in today to do this pod. I was like, oh, it's March. We're going to do more Stone and Skillet ad rates. It's I swear by them. We've talked about this all the time. Like, we try to find and partner with people on this pod that we kind of believe in or like we want to do or we support. So as we always say, if you can't support the Patreon or whatever, support the people that support us. And Stone and Skillet does an awesome job, Cam and everyone over there, of supporting us. So best English muffins on the market. I swear by them, and they're really good. Morning, noon, or night. Sometimes at night, too.
And then quickly also, today's show is also brought to you by Prize Picks. PrizePicks.com, Prize Picks app, promo code Dane for a $100 sign-up bonus. We got a Wolves game tonight, so you can take a look at what is set up there. Just quickly, I was looking at, they still got Jaden McDaniels under 10 points, 9.5. That moved down recently to be his kind of nightly number, 9.5, kind of like that. I was looking at Carl's, his point total's down to like 21.5. I was thinking about it, and I'm like, all right, I think they're either going to double Carl a bunch so as to, let him maybe rack up 6, 7, 8 assists in the game, or not and score. So I think if you kind of put those two together, 24.5 points plus assists, I like that for Carl. And then I took a less than on Rudy Gobert. I think Sabonis is one of those matchups that could potentially get him in foul trouble. Rudy's numbers are still, kind of what they are at all the time. He's still maybe dealing with that ankle a little bit, isn't coming off a great game. So I put under 28.5 points, rebounds, and assists for Gobert. As always, you guys can just check out not just the Wolves ones, but all NBA otherwise. It's a fun thing to do. I think maybe particularly on a night when the Wolves aren't playing and you're watching the NBA. So that's PrizePicks.com, PrizePicks app, promo code Dane for a $100 sign up bonus. Kyle, let's you're mentioning the 42 wins thing before. Obviously this team went 42-40 last year, and they got their 42nd win of the season on February 28th, and round numbers, whatever, it makes it easier to look at, but it is such a reminder of where this team has come without making that many changes. And it's probably just a good thing for us to reflect on this more, maybe even more often than we do, that this was the same group last season, and that this group is just significantly more consistent, significantly more healthy than they were a year ago. I was reading Britt's column this morning. The starting five, all 5 of them have started 40 of the 59 games this season. That helps, but I don't know. What are just some factors in your mind that have gone into making this be so different this season and so much more winning at such a higher rate than they did a year ago?
I do that stupid tweet after they hit a milestone of a previous season, and when I posted the 42-17 compared to 42-40, I like to add photos to it. And last year's photo, I put Rudy Gobert punching Kyle Anderson, and this year I put Kyle Anderson and Rudy Gobert hugging. And that's my answer. Like we have Jim Pete on Flagrant Howls every Thursday now, and the beauty of that is he's already become a better podcaster than I am, which isn't a surprise to many. But he just tells it like it is, right? It's just like a broadcast. Jim just tells it like it is, and he travels with the team on the team plane. He's on the bus, and just the chemistry. I mean, really, the camaraderie, and that also, I think you like everyone. You like your coworkers more when vibes are good and you're winning. Mm-hmm. But I mean, that's a big part of it. That's not a numbers thing. That I'm sure you have a ton of stats you can throw at me, but when you say that the same exact group of guys is just playing way better basketball, you have to kind of commend the vibes or, the camaraderie or maybe just the continuity of having. I mean, you don't see continuity in sports too often anymore either, right? Like you always see these rosters get major changes. So that's been the big one to me, is just another year for all these guys playing for Finch. I know Finch has had his ups and downs, just like almost anyone on this roster, but they've come together. They believe in like the system. They trust the defense. Rudy, back and forth, you and I, like he's healthier. He trusts his teammates more. Both, but he clearly trusts his teammates more, and he's going to win his 4th Defensive Player of the Year. And this team might have 2 defensive guys on all defensive teams. So I'm sure you have a better answer than I do, but it's cool to watch these guys just gel and trust each other more. Find guys in the corner more. There's been more lobs. Defenses on a string. They kind of trust each other in transition a little more. They're a weird, borderline bad transition team, but they're starting to find each other a little more, like 3-on-2, 2-on-1 things. Like they're actually better at that now. So that's been a big thing to me, is just the continuity. That the same guys that, as Kyle Anderson said, went through hell, they kept going, and now I guess they're in heaven. I don't know. I feel like I'm in heaven.
I give Ant a lot of blame for that up and down sort of nature of this team, right? I think in almost every one of the, I guess, bad losses or games when they've blown a lead, like my eye in the game when I'm watching it is like, this is Ant, not taking it as
losing
serious,
focus.
not being, yeah, right. And I think that's whatever. Anybody's watching it, you can kind of see it. Like Ant is the straw that stirs the drink for this team when it's a bad drink. Mm-hmm. He's also the straw that stirs the drink every game, and when I think about 42-40 last season versus 42-17 this year, not to take away from the strides that Rudy has made or the adjustments that Kat has made, the way I think Nikhil and Naz have grown even more, but it's Ant. It's Ant to me. Fair. He drives this, and also, I still even say this all the time where I'm like, back-to-back Ant, like maybe take the under on his points, or like it's in a back-to-back, you might get a one lazy quarter from Ant now, but he's gotten more consistent in that. And I think while there are elements of immaturity to his game, there's a lot more maturity than it was before. I mean, I think you always just need to set the scene of like, he came in rookie year 1, 0 out of 10 in so many ways, right? In terms of readiness, maturity, understanding, all that. And if you're going from that, even, 3.5 years later, it's impressive to be passing even in many of those ways. And he's excelling. I don't know what else. I mean, yeah, I think it's the collective continuity of the group. But if I had to pinpoint one thing for why the Wolves are this, it's because Anthony Edwards has raised himself to a level of a consistent star on a winning team. And quite frankly, that's not something I anticipated him doing or being at 22 years old. Now, maybe he couldn't have done that without Rudy making the defense number one, and Kat and all the other things I said. But yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with Ant, of course.
I'm a little biased because I was there right up close and personal for those 2 Blazers games. But I finally was able to
those were a great example of this. Yeah.
I was finally able to watch them back on League Pass, and those were really impressive performances by him specifically, because it's just, you're beaten up. I think he was questionable in one of those games, or maybe both, with the knee thing. It's the right before All-Star break, which now if you're an All-Star is going to be a drain just because you're kind of stretched in so many ways. And at one point, maybe it was the second Blazers game, but they were up again, 20-25, and he had a possession where he did like the slap the floor on defense. And that's when you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, this isn't Georgia Ant anymore. Like this. And, credit where credit's due, too. We've talked about this ad nauseum before, but I think the organization should get a little cred, too, because
sure.
I do, as we watch these drafts, I've kind of been like down Rockets Twitter a little bit. I think they've had 9 first-round picks in like the last 3 or 4 years, and they've spent all this money. And they're going to finish 12th in the West, right? Like, I think it's important that Anthony Edwards, who had questions about, the whole football thing, like, does he love basketball? Has he ever won? Has he ever played on a big stage? Ever since he got to this team, they've surrounded him. We always talk about like the point guards, right? He's played with real important vets. As soon as they got Anthony Edwards, they basically kind of tried to start winning. Like they didn't say, hey, we're going to tank a year and try to get one more high pick. They really just said, okay, we got this jet engine. We're going to try to like fly. And it was a slow couple of years.
Take off, yeah.
Yeah, it was a slow takeoff, but now that thing is humming, and I'm probably being mean to the kid, but when I look at other lottery picks that are in bad situations, like I think of LaMelo Ball all the time, and it's just they've never really put the right pieces around him. They've never really tried to win, and now it's like his stock is low. I don't know what LaMelo Ball is, and that's scary because when you get out of your rookie contract and now you're into these maxes and super maxes depending on all NBA, you have to know. It's like the quarterback in the NFL. Like you got to know after 4 years, is this kid going to be the face of our franchise? Don't worry about the face of the league. Can he be the face of our franchise? And we're in year 4, and I don't know if this team, other than one other player in 35 years, has ever felt more confident in the guy that they are going to pin their hopes to in Anthony Edwards. And he deserves it because, again, they're up 25 against the 14th team in the West, and he is slapping the floor trying to play defense. Like, that's not what he did in year 1, and all credit to him as well.
I like the quarterback example. Like, that was the thing. I don't know if I don't follow the NFL salary cap as much, but I know the basic idea of like
rookie quarterbacks.
Yeah. If you have a quarterback on the rookie scale, like you could just spend a whole bunch of money elsewhere. Right. Mm-hmm. And it does that. I actually don't remember if I was talked about this with Brendan on the podcast while we were recording or afterwards, or after we stopped hitting record. But we were talking about Keegan Murray and how like it's kind of important for the Kings to like figure out what their team is going to be before Murray signs that probably max contract, and sometimes we do the thing, you point to Houston or something like that and you go, they just spend a whole bunch of money right away to get good. And it's like dangerous, right? Like sometimes that isn't going to work.
Jalen Green.
Yeah. And you just like kind of set yourself into a position where you didn't get good at the right time. There's some value to that just from an economic cap structure standpoint. And, to the Kings point, like they probably got to figure out who it is before before Murray's cap number jumps massively. And the Wolves did that with Ant. And, and I was skeptical of the reasons for that. I didn't like the idea of kind of going all in on Cat's window versus Ant's window. That was kind of my line back then when they made the Gobert trade. But reflecting on it more, and to your point of what you were just talking about, there's not just value in like putting Ant and Jaden in situations to win early in their career. There's literal like cap value in figuring out who you want to be and how you're going to be that, getting those pieces in before Ant's number jumps, before Jaden's number jumps, because then you can bring back Mike Conley on an extension. You can bring back Kyle Anderson with bird rights if you want, right? Like even though you have this huge like luxury tax situation, there is a gift in being able to even be there, right? To be able to spend that much money. Actually, to spend into the luxury tax that high, you have to have kind of built your team well. Because to get that high into the luxury tax, you're like, all right, we're already over the cap, and now we are bringing back our players that have been good, and we're giving them raises so as to do that. And that has just, quite frankly, the reason I didn't think that was a great idea with Ant is just because I thought this was going to take some time, because he came in, he was so young and he was so green, and it's just worked to put him in that winning environment. And then I think salary cap wise, it's put them in a situation to be able to, have the volume of talent that they have on their team. And they will have, at some point, Mike's going to retire and some of that stuff's going to happen, but into the like ramp up into Ant's prime, they're going to have a heavy talent team. And that's just worked because they didn't underestimate Ant in the ways that I did.
Have you ever thought, this might be a take, but I think it's more detrimental to an NBA franchise to give a max extension, like off of a rookie contract, to a player you're unsure of than to just miss in the lottery. Because if you miss in the lottery, like you're probably going to suck, and then you'll go back to the well again the next year, and you'll take another swing. But if you don't know at the end of that short 4-year window or whatever that this is a guy, again, I kind of just interrupted you, but like the Jalen Green thing was, go back and look at that draft, right? Like it was Mobley. And who was first in that draft? I'm blanking. Great podcast, right?
Paulo. Right?
Yeah. Or no, Paulo was like the Jabari Smith one, I think. But my point is that like the Jalen Green thing was a real question, and he just hasn't worked out. And now there's a lot of stuff that, like, he's probably going to be on his way out, and that is detrimental. I mean, obviously they're probably not going to pay him, but it's just detrimental when you either invest in the wrong guy, or to a lesser extent, in my opinion, you miss on the guy. And that 2020 draft, we talked about this yesterday with Jim Pete, who he just was like, I know circumstances are what they are, and it was kind of a messy breakup, but Tim Conley has really taken this thing to a level that we haven't seen. But Gerson Rosas really left him a lot of chips. Like, that 2020 draft is the most into a draft I've ever been, because I was trapped at my house and at Canis, like, we were doing large breakdowns of Denny Avdia's, like, diet because we had nothing else to do. We couldn't leave the house. But that was the hardest draft, in my opinion, I guess in my lifetime, that to scout, because you didn't have March Madness. You didn't have any guys, like, setting themselves apart. You didn't have a summer league. You didn't have a combine. So for them to come out of the 2020 draft with an Anthony Edwards, who was by no means a bona fide number 1 overall pick. Like, it was LaMelo and, James Wiseman and stuff. And then to also grab Jaden in what was essentially like a James Johnson and Poku for Ricky Rubio and Jaden and the ghost of Leandro Balmero. Add Naz Reid in there as an undrafted free agent, another guy that showed you during his time, yep, we can pay him. We can put that on the books as well. So every player that they've brought in that's under 25, Nikhil's another one, has panned out to such a level that you're like, I'm okay. I mean, how many other teams can you think of that in February know they have their 7 best players signed for the next season? That's just so rare. And the Wolves have that. And we'll learn about them in the playoffs, and maybe they'll switch it up a little bit this summer. But that's just another feather in their cap as well from the front office, is that all these guys that are contributing the most are going to be here at least another year. And that allows for, again, back to my original point, that continuity that might be the backbone of all of this.
That draft was Cade Cunningham first one. Cade Cunningham, Jalen Reed.
Thank you.
Green.
We don't know. I mean, I think we know on Cade, but that's another one. It's like the Pistons never put guys around him.
That's the point, right? Is I'm thinking about all those guys. I would leave Green out of there because I don't think he'll get a max. But like with Cade and Mobley and even Scotty Barnes was the 4th pick there. It's like obviously you're going to give those guys maxes, but you don't really know if they're a number 1. Right. And I think I probably with Cade feel confident that, things go right. He's like a number 2, but there's some sort of like cap risk, or it just makes it like shrinks the hole that you have to thread the needle through. If, Mobley is only like a 3rd best player on your team. Right. And you're like, now we need to get more creative ways in which to get a number 2. And we're in this more of a cap bind because we did give Mobley that, what I'm saying? And yeah, that's just of course, like, not breaking news here, but the value in being able to have your rookie player that you signed to that max extension be, a bona fide number 1, which as Ant is, but even if it's a bona fide number 2, like, that just makes it easier to build going forward. And even then it's still tough. Like, look at the Wolves, it's just, but I like that. I like that take of like, a player that's not a bust in the draft that ends up getting a max and doesn't live up to that max or doesn't heavily exceed it can almost be as costly as being a bust in the first place. Maybe not the same, but I get what you're saying there.
And I would take it one step further, because you were saying like bona fide 2, but if you don't have a 1, I don't think it matters if you have a 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah, right.
Because
look at Brooklyn with Bridges.
Yeah, if Brooklyn, and not to just completely dump on the Rockets, but like, I think Jabari Smith has played really well, and they have maybe a 2 there, and maybe they have Şengün is awesome, so maybe he's their 2 and Jabari Smith's their 3. They don't have a 1, and Rockets fans themselves are pretty open. Like, we don't have that guy, and if you don't have that guy in a league that is driven by just having that guy, I mean, it is back to the quarterback thing. If you don't have a quarterback, your team's not going to be good, and if you don't have a 1, a guy that can be the best player on a championship team, you have no chance in this league. And 4 years in, 5 months into this season, the Wolves know with a bullet they have a 1. They probably have a 2 and a 3 and maybe a 4. So it's the best chance they've had in 20 years to make a little bit of noise, back to that 03-04 season, which we reference all the time. And again, to match last year's win total on Leap Day, or on it, before the end of February, is a pretty cool accomplishment. And it's been kind of cool too, because like, I look up to like Jim Pete, who we have on the pod, or Britt, who we have on the pod. Those guys have seen more than any of us, right? I mean, I've been a fan my whole life, but they've been Jim was saying yesterday that, I called a lot of those games when they're 20 and 63. Yeah. And I don't know if you remember, but Jim Pete used to do a lot of discussions in the fourth quarter about yard work because there was nothing else to talk about.
Yeah, right.
And the kind of the older generation who still, I'm sure they're still young at heart, but they're embracing this and just kind of being like, just enjoy this for a second. And I preach that all the time because, and I said this yesterday, I always will think about for my entire basketball sports life when the Thunder were playing the Heat and the Heat are about to win their first title with the Heatles and Durant and Harden and Westbrook are standing on the sideline and Mike Breen or whatever was like, just look at that young trio. They're going to be back here many years, bright future in OKC. And then 3 months later, they traded Harden. So even though they have 7 of their best players in Minnesota extended through at least another season, it's no guarantee that all 7 will be back in October. So enjoy this moment, embrace this team. It's a lot of fun, and as long as they don't trip over themselves, there's really no one in their way outside of maybe one team in Denver that can really slow them down in the West.
I know you wanted Kyle to talk about Jaden McDaniels and his play of late. I guess this is the second half of the podcast segment every day this week. I mean, it is a big thing, and I'll just quickly to the point of when we were talking about pecking order there, in relation to max contracts and all that sort of stuff. The Wolves are in the situation, like you just said, of they got their 1, 2, and 3 all figured out, and the thing we're gnashing our teeth over is the 5. How's the 5th guy fitting into that? It's not working as well. We paid him and those sort of things. And I think it's a fair conversation because it's Jaden does need to be that better version of himself, so as to kind of that does push the ceiling of this sum, I think. And so I think it's something that makes sense to be, maybe overly diving into in February, because this is what we're doing when it's a team that's good and you're digging into the smaller things. But this isn't an important element of the Wolves. He had a rough start out of the break, but did kind of get back on track against Memphis in the last game. Is probably his best game of the month of February. What did you want to get to in with Jaden?
I mean, I think you and Chris and Jace and Britt have done a really good job. I kind of blew my load yesterday I made a page of notes on this. Again, I know I'm biased. I enjoy watching the kid from watching him in college. I enjoy his story. And for the most part, he's surpassed he was drafted 28th. Right? He was drafted, I know I said the trade that they acquired him in, he was selected behind Leandro Bolmaro, who is not in the league. So what he's done in these first 4 years, I think, is really impressive. I also think outside of that wall thing, I've interviewed that wall, I've seen that wall. It is a hidden wall behind a curtain. But outside of that one moment, I mean, he hasn't, the Mike Conley situation the other night, he's literally just going to fight Dennis Schroeder for Mike. And when the Rudy Gobert thing happened, he was kind of the guy that got in there to break it up. And I think he's a really good teammate. To the general point of he hasn't taken the offensive leap, all that stuff, I'm with you. I don't think he's free of blame. But I also just wonder, back to your point about the 5th, we're arguing about the 5th guy in the totem pole. It's yeah, man, the Minnesota Timberwolves fan base has eaten ramen for so many years, and now you have a 5-course meal, and you're so concerned about the dessert. It's right. Dude, you're eating steak and mash. Everything is really good, and this guy, outside of and you and Britt went into this yesterday. The thing that I'm most defensive of is I don't believe his effort has gone down.
Yeah, neither do I. Yeah.
And I'm just curious because the things that everyone loved about him the first couple of years, he shows no emotion. He's just straight laced. He just has the Timberwolves Twitter account posted the 4 photos. I was happy Jaden, sad Jaden, Jaden having a baby, Jaden excited. They're all the same face. Well, now that he's in a funk, everyone's look at him. He's not showing any emotion. He's just grifting out there. He's not trying. It's it's the exact same demeanor he had when we started a fan club in his sophomore season. And then I tweeted this out the other day. I was Jaden McDaniels, as of today, is the 269th highest paid player in the league. And then I got people being that's misleading. Look at what he's going to make next year. It's okay, it's March 1st. It's 55 degrees and sunny in Minneapolis. If I said that and someone's that's misleading, it's going to be 30 next Saturday, buddy. It's 55 and sunny today. That's not, how are you arguing with that? Look at the weather app. So today, Jaden is making less money than Troy Brown, Daniel House, Shake Milton, Poku. Cameron Payne, his brother. Do you know where Jalen McDaniels plays? I don't know where he plays. Yes, he's going to make more money next season. So is Cat. He's going to get $30 million extra dollars. Next year, if all the same guys are on the team, they have to find ways to get Jaden more involved. They do. And he has to find more ways to, cut a little more. Like you said yesterday, he can't just make those baseline cuts because Rudy's in the dunker spot. Find more ways to get him involved. But he's fouling at a less rate than he ever has in his career. Like his fouls per 36 are the lowest of his 4 years.
Sure.
Fouling out is not a great stat, but he has fouled out once in 2024. So this idea that he's this foul merchant isn't really true. And if you can point out games where, yes, he had 2 early fouls, I kind of blame Finch a little bit or the coaching staff. Then put Mike Conley on a bigger wing for the first 4 minutes of the game. The first quarter is all about just feeling it out, dancing around the boxing ring, just kind of getting your arms loose. So don't put Jaden in situations where at the 10:30 mark of the first quarter he has 2 fouls. Find ways to just let him float a little bit. You said yesterday, get him a couple more offensive possessions early. You know who's going to close the game late. It's going to be Ant. It's going to be Jaden or Carl. It's going to be Mike and Rudy running pick and roll. So I am biased, and I went on a rant, and I am kind of giving him excuses. There are things he could do to be better. I think his defense has slipped a little bit, but his defense is like all defense, right? So now, maybe he just won't make all defense, but he's still one of the best 20 defenders in the league. So I don't really know why we're nitpicking again the dessert when he's not causing issues behind the scenes. He's not demanding more play. And to end this rant, Britt is always pretty vocal. I think Jim's vocal too. I said this to him yesterday about they don't like when Jaden goes off script. They don't like when Jaden does what Carl does and attack 3 guys by himself and kind of go, do it on his own. That's bad. I don't like that either. But if Jaden's not allowed to go hunting for his own food and they don't pass him the ball, so no one's spoon feeding him, how is Jaden supposed to eat? Mm-hmm. I know his nickname is Slim, but how is he supposed to get carbohydrates and nutrients? I mean, I one photo, one screen grab, and I hate that, but in that game the other night, Ant drives into the lane. I was texting you this during the game. All 5 defenders collapse on him. Jaden's in the slot. Monty Morris is pointing at him hey, Jaden's open, and Ant went 1-on-5. Guess what? He got an Ant 1 because he's one of the 10 best players in the league. That's fine. But it's also kind of a microcosm of he doesn't really get the ball much. So right. I don't think he's a problem. I would just be out of sight, out of mind, just play defense, whatever. As long as you're not demanding 15 shots a game, then I don't really care. And I don't think he is behind the scenes, but that's my Jaden rant. I don't know. Take what you want.
I think I want to touch on a couple things about that. But first, just of the defense and laying it out there, I think defensive estimated plus minus is the best sort of catch-all metric we have for, defensive impact. And Jaden's played 49 games this season. He's missed 10. If you go to and you set the bar of players who have played in 49 or more games this season, he's 9th in the NBA in defensive estimated plus minus. Actually, behind Nickeil Alexander-Walker is above him in that, but 9th, in that, or overall 96th percentile. So the defense, at least in terms of numbers, hasn't dropped. And I think what we're dealing with kind of is that became the expectation in ways. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And maybe Jaden hasn't gotten better at defense than last year, where let me just click on it. So he's 96th percentile defensively. Last season, he was 92nd percentile in terms of defensive estimated plus minus. So actually, those suggest it's better. Maybe that's a team defense thing, whatever. But Jaden's bar defensively, I think, is pretty much the same. Like you said, the fouls have gone down. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm just saying last season it wasn't perfect either. And I think there's just, to the contract point, become the expectation that, okay, he was actually going to become the very best, with a bullet perimeter defender in the league. Is that a reasonable expectation to have put on him? Is the question I think we need to ask ourselves when we start getting down on him. Yes, I would have liked to seen more offense from him this season. That absolutely, even within the small role he has offensively, it could have been better. It could be more effective, more productive in that sort of way. But to your point, he isn't being paid $23 million a year. And then when I was just looking at these are the guys this year who are making
thank you
over 22. And it's Bruce Brown, 22 million, Aaron Gordon, 22, Draymond Green, 22, Malcolm Brogdon, 22.5, Dylan Brooks, 22.5, Terry Rozier, 23. Jordan Clarkson, 23.5. RJ Barrett, 23.9. Like, and I'm not saying any of those players are bad players, but it's just like, I think it's a good example of like, we could go through every single one of those players and be like, there's some things I need to see from RJ Barrett before I'm thinking this is like some awesome value contract, right? You know, Bruce Brown, he's certainly a valuable player, but is he perfect? Has he lived up to the 22 million that he signed for? You know, I mean, Aaron Gordon, that's a great value contract there. Draymond, obviously that comes with pluses and minuses. Malcolm Brogdon at that number too. You know, it's just like, it's important to contextualize like what the expectation even is for a $22-23 million player in today's NBA. And those players probably are better than Jaden McDaniels right now. But Jaden will be making that much money next season. Is he in that range and in that conversation? I don't think any of those teams are like, oh man, you know, I got RJ Barrett at $23 million a year. Like they didn't view that as like a negative asset in the trade where they just acquired him, you know. I mean, maybe some people, you know, like RJ Barrett, whatever. But that framing I just think is important. Is Jaden did not sign for the max. You know, he signed for 16% of the max. And if he makes all NBA, he's going to get 30% of the salary cap. Sorry, Jaden's at 16% of the salary cap, and it's going to be 30. Like, there's a gap here, you know, and myself included. This isn't a pointing out thing. I think I've been harsh on Jaden too. I need to remember that in my own framing of the context in which the contract he's been signed to, but is not yet earning. Yet at the same time, they need Jaden to be this player now, this season.
100%.
He does need to be that, but I'm just framing it. That's what that is.
But I keep seeing this. Are you ready to have the Jaden McDaniels conversation? And my question is, what is the conversation? Yeah. Because if your point is that he's not playing well, I agree. I mean, he did have a kind of a bounce back game against the Grizzlies, but yeah, for 6 weeks or whatever, he was not playing well, and he's got that weird hand wrap still, and he does have some stuff in his personal life going on. Like, you never know, and I know people don't want to hear that, but guess what? They're no different employees than us. They just are way more athletic and make way more money. But yeah, so I said he's 269th this year in salary. You showed that tab. Next year, when he does make 22.5 million, he actually will rank 65th. That's before we get into free agency this summer. But he'll be 65th in the league in terms of highest paid players. That would put him right behind guys. You showed a couple, but Dylan Brooks, Andrew Wiggins, Kyle Kuzma, Cameron Johnson, and Jordan Poole. That's kind of a unique group of players, right? Like,
sure.
If he doesn't score, if he doesn't take any shots, if he goes full PJ Tucker and just plays defense, he's more valuable than Jordan Poole. Right? Like, Cam Johnson, sure. Like, I know you made the Brooklyn thing. Like, he's a 3, 4, 5th best player on a championship team. But what's his one good skill? He's not like a lights out shooter. He's pretty good, but
Cam Johnson, I mean, yeah, but he isn't. He hasn't played at that.
That's my point. Yeah, again, so fire him. I think you can be like, hey, I don't think Jaden's playing very well, but he hasn't disrupted the apple cart at all, both on the court or off the court. There are ways, again, just like we've done with everyone else, right? Like, hey, why does the offense suck outside of switching sides of the court? Like, maybe get Cat in the corner a little more. Like, the coaching staff has a responsibility as well, and I'm very pro Finch, but I was with you. I'm always big on establishing the run in the first quarter because I think the first quarter is meaningless. I think it's funny, by the way, in terms of all the Wolves scar tissue we have. Just wanted to take a quick time out to credit all of Wolves Twitter because they were down 14-0 against the Grizzlies. And I didn't know, they took a timeout. I didn't know if the fans were still going to have to stand. That seems like pretty gruesome. But I
timed it 9 minutes.
No one on the timeline against that Grizzlies game freaked out. And I just want to congratulate each and every one of you because we've graduated. We know that this team is just really good. But they're down 14-0. I was just like checking like the live line on DraftKings. I was like, okay, they're minus 410. Like everyone in the world looks like they're going to come back and win. And they did. So credit to the fans. But yeah, I mean, they have to find ways now. You know Ant is cooking. My concern with Anthony Edwards is that don't peak, right? Like 31 a game in February. Keep that just please because you are, as Dane said, the straw that stirs the drink. 31 points a game from Ant is going to be, I think, the baseline come playoff time. They need as much Anthony Edwards as possible, and they probably need that same hey, I'm just going to guard Jaren Jackson Jr. defense too. He's going to have to play out of his mind. You know what you got with Carl now. I think Carl is having, in 2024, since the calendar flipped, he's playing his best basketball for the most part. Rudy. Mike Conley's back. Kyle Anderson's kind of found his swagger again too. So they do need Jaden to be at his height. I don't think he's floor ceiling determined. I guess maybe he would be more on like, if he's playing well, the ceiling again just elevates to another level. But if all he does is play the level of defense we've seen since he arrived here back in 2020, I think that's enough, not only for this small contract, but next year as well. So, and again, the next year stuff, I just don't understand why anyone cares. I don't. Like, Mike Conley took a 50%. I think you're paying Mike Conley and Jane McDaniels $30 million this year. And next year you're going to, no, this year, right? Like, what does Mike make this year, right?
Mike's like 25. No, you're right. Yeah.
So Mike and Jaden this year make $30 million. Yeah. And next year they make $30 million. And guess what? Minnesota Mike is minted. He should run for governor. But he's not going to probably give you 82 games. I mean, at some point you're going to see a decline in Mike as he just nears his 40s. So he's going to take 50% pay cut, and Jaden's going to make 500% more. And you just got to shift a little bit more. You got to find Jaden getting to 10 points a game, 12 points a game. But for this season, I literally do not know why anyone cares what the contract extension is. I have no idea. And maybe you do, and I'm just not seeing it.
No. I think it's I guess it would maybe be fear about like he's never going to live up to it or something. I mean, that would be the only logical explanation I could think of there. But yeah, like you said, and it's something, I've adjusted myself as I've been doing this, for a long time, and we do get to this time of year often, and we do sort of shift. Even like the Pat Bev season, even at this time, it was like you knew it was probably a first round and done sort of team. So even right now, we were thinking about, what are the moves? What are the things that they can do or need to do from a roster construction standpoint for next season to keep building on that? The Wolves are the 1 seed in the West, and that conversation becomes a little bit more out of place, and I'm trying to check that. We did the Mike Conley pod, and I was just like, it's All-Star break, whatever. We're going to talk about the cap and stuff like that. And the amount of people are just like, like, don't tell me they have to like break this team up. Why can't you just enjoy it? I was like, okay, it's All-Star break. I just thought, he signed a contract extension. We could do it. But I also get it from to some extent, of like, yeah, things are going to continue to get more complicated down the road. Not like, let's forget about that stuff, but I understand the fans who don't want to think about it now. It is something that I'm going to think about, but it doesn't need to be something to dwell on there.
Yesterday, or maybe 2 days ago with Britt, I think Britt highlighted that Jaden's numbers across the board have dropped a little bit, right? He was 12.1 points last year. He's down to 10. He's like 4 rebounds last year. He's down to 2.7. And the one caveat that I don't think you guys mentioned, like why have those numbers dropped? Because he played 58 games last year without Carl, right? So when Carl was out, Jaden stepped into a bigger role and shot 40% from 3 and 52% from the field and took 9 attempts a game. Now he's down to 7.9 attempts a game. Like, when Carl's back, people don't like when we talk about Carl's sacrifice, so I'm sure they're going to hate this, but like, kind of just had to sacrifice with Jaden. We were, at some point, at least maybe me and the fan club, were pretty nervous about Jaden signing that extension back in October. That was only 4 or 5 months ago. And I kept coming back this week when everyone was pretty down on him, or the last couple of weeks. He signs that extension that takes him from $3.5 million to $22.5 million starting next year. And I was like, all right, Mikal Bridges or Tatum and Jaylen Brown, right? And Finch, I don't know if it was at Media Day or it was just in Britt's one-on-one with him. It's like, okay, Jaden's about to get paid, he's the Scottie Pippen to this Michael Jordan. What do you see his future to be like? How much more usage? And Finch said it flat out publicly, he's not going to get any more food. He's not going to get any more pie. It's like, wait a second, you just gave this guy a 500, 600% raise. And Finch's like, we have no room to give Jaden any more offense. So that's been the case. Like you said, his role hasn't changed all year. Finch said it in October. His role is not going to change. His role hasn't changed. And now people are like, well, why hasn't he playing better? And it's like, I don't know. Maybe because his role
and why he isn't playing better, because he isn't playing better, is maybe there are more small tweaks that he can do or the coaching staff can do, but they all fall within that small slice of pie. I think that's the point, is like the answer here isn't to extend the size of the pie and be like, okay, you go from a 12% usage to a 20% usage or whatever. It's what can Jaden do within the usage he has, and where can he go get cheapies, right? Whenever Finch gets this question, he always talks about, well, if Jaden wants to get 5 or 6 more points per game, he can get out and run and find them in transition. And then there you go. Boom. He goes
Which he did against Memphis in that last possession. And guess what? Ant almost didn't give it to him. And Jaden was out, right? Or in a couple games ago when he got benched, and he did, because he was just running, he was jogging up and down the court, getting cardio in. Go watch that 3-minute set. The Wolves got out into transition like 3 or 4 times. And if you've ever played pickup ball, it was just him going back and forth like, I'm not going to get the ball. Right. So I'm not defending him because he did just kind of lackadaisically jog up and down. But there were like 3-on-1s with Ant, Kyle, and Jaden where Jaden's like, there's no chance I'm getting this basketball.
Right.
And it sounds like, again, I'm making excuses, but come on. You've played. Like, if you know you're not going to get the ball that much, it probably comes... And again, that's a lack of maturity on a kid who has some immaturity flags. Like, you have to find ways to kind of, I guess, to your point about the pie, find ways to make the pie just taste better. Yep. It's the same exact slice, but is there whipped cream to put on it early in the first quarter? Are there ways we always talked about last year and this year where Rudy is the best defensive player on this team, but you got to keep him engaged on offense?
Yeah.
Why would that not be the same general thinking with a guy that you just gave a 600% raise to? Like, we need Jaden to be the second best defender on this team. Obviously, Ant can be the second best at times, but more consistency, Jaden is that guy. How do we find ways to keep him engaged? And to me, that's a complete combination between Jaden and his mental focus and the coaching staff. And I don't think the coaching staff is all that concerned right now about making the pie taste better.
I just want to plug before we wrap up this episode that this would be a fun weekend to go to Falling Knife to check out the games.
55 degrees and sunny.
Yeah, right. And they do have an outdoor setup there as well. Obviously, we talk all the time about they have the games on with the sound on in the tap room there. But it sounds like the weekend ones are the most fun, most well attended. And you got tonight against the Kings as a game to go to Falling Knife, but also on Sunday as well for that matinee game. They're going to have that going as well, doing a trivia thing after the game. So if you want to just kind of make a Sunday out of it, Falling Knife Brewing Company, Northeast Minneapolis. I mean, every game there's Wolves fans there, but I think particularly fun to sort of put that on your radar for a weekend, and also even if you don't drink or you don't want to drink on a Sunday, they do have non-alcoholic options. They got food options there. It's just I guess it's ostensibly a bar, but it's a place to just kind of get together and watch Wolves games too. So put that on your radar for this weekend. What else? Anything else you want to just touch on? The only other thing I had written down was like Nas and the bench, but we're already up over an hour. We haven't talked in a while. If there's anything else you want to get on here.
Well, before we close, Falling Knife has really good water, by the way. Just honestly, I'm a water guy, so they have good water. But yeah, they open at 12 on Sunday. I just checked their hours. So Wolves tip off at 2:30 on Sunday against the Clippers. So you could go there, grab some food, grab a water, grab a beverage. Yeah, grab a water. No, just to conclude it.
They got weed water too now, too.
What? Yeah. Let's just do the Nas.
I don't know why that's a thing. Why is that? Why is that how everybody reacts to THC beverages?
Because every time I talk about Portland. Because every time I talk about gambling, alcohol, or legal drugs, I'm told that those are the things that are ruining the country and not... Anyway, moving on. Nas stuff to say for next week. I do think Nas Reed, even in that Carl absence game, which I know was personal reasons and all that stuff, and thoughts go out to Carl because I know he lost another friend this week, and that's just brutal. But Nas Reed has shown more and more that... I don't know. This is getting ahead of us, and I know people don't like this, but Nas Reed can be a starting power forward in the league. He's phenomenal. His play has been amazing. But I just want to close it with the Jaden conversation. Sure. Just be honest with me. People like when we go back and forth. I know I'm biased. I'm putting that out there. But I also just think that I'm maybe one of the only ones looking at it through a sane lens. So am I wrong? Am I right? Just judge my take.
I mean, I get what you're saying is you're looking at him in the context of a $3.9 million 23-year-old right now, which he is. I can't argue with that. I maybe can't make a strong, extremely rational argument to say I'm disappointed he hasn't been better this season. I am, and yeah, the faces are all the same all the time, but Jaden has, some volatile emotions, right? Like what I've been saying is this week, it wasn't really like you said, like the lackadaisical kind of running up and down. I just had the sense that he was just like a little moody in those games. And I'm not judging that. Like that, and it's not great, but I'm moody at games sometimes, it's a back and back.
Right,
Like it's like,
right. Oh my
and I'm
God, you've
not
never been
doing
crabby at
anything.
work?
Yeah. Like again, I'm not, and I don't think you are either, giving like a complete pass to it because I think about it like everything this season where it's like, okay. And what I've done all year and it's bothered some people is I've been like, all right, I watched that in November and I was like, shit, dude, this is one of the best teams in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
And and there were a lot of things that they weren't doing. And it was like, it totally changed my framing of the whole season of like, and once they all started saying it, no, we have this expectation of being a contender, doing this, getting better over the course of the year. And I try to hold them to that, and talk about where are the areas that they are getting better and where they aren't, that's what I like to do in my analysis of the team. And it's kind of the same thing with Jaden, where I'm not like, it's not like Jaden is having a bad year. There's things that he could do better to be having a year that is a lot better than it has been, and it's all about where you're setting the bar of expectation for McDaniels. And I don't think you have low expectations for it. I think you have a more in line, maybe more sane and logical bar of what it is, given his age, given what his contract is. And like, I think you believe that it is going to continue to grow. And so do I. I guess I'm just more, I'm sensing the urge. I'm wanting there to be a greater sense of urgency because for this team to go to the Western Conference Finals, which I believe it can do, almost everything needs to be clicking.
Mm-hmm.
And
Correct.
and that's one of the things that can, will, and should, whatever, be clicking on a higher level. And that's why I'm not indicting what he's done. I'm not praising what he's done. It's like, this is why it's really worth watching the final 23 games of the season to be like, where are they when they're getting into the playoff at the end of the season? Are they taking off into the playoffs from? Because to me, that is going to have, when I ultimately make my pick or just have my thoughts of how far this team can go, it's going to be about how many of those things that they kind of had to sand down over the course of an 82 game season did they sand down. And they've been slowly doing that over the course of the season. We talked about at the top of the episode, the offense is the first one. And February was the best offensive month of the entire season. So can Jaden keep sanding it down? Can he get more confident? And can his teammates help him out? That's a great point with Antwin. There's another in the first quarter. Rudy's in the slot and he wants to run that little like handoff, get action, DHO, whatever you want to call it, sort of thing. There was once in the first quarter, I should clip this out, where Jaden was just like, oh, I'm here. Like, we can do that. And Rudy was like, nope. Jaden went off, like came back for it again for a dribble hand, now coming back the other direction. Rudy was like, nope. And there was Jaden. It's just kind of like, Jaden's like, well, what do you want me to do then? Like, this is where my spot is at the offense. And he probably gets in his head. He's like, yeah, I get a dribble handoff between Rudy Gobert and Mike Conley is better than a Rudy Gobert and Jaden McDaniels or Rudy Gobert and Anthony Edwards. But it's like, you can still give him the ball there at that time and run that action. I think particularly because it's the first quarter. Like, if you're Rudy, don't be afraid to do that. Like, get Jaden a rhythm going in the first quarter. Look what that does for Nas. I really think it would be similar. Like, I understand the pie is small and you want to empower your best players, but I continue. And it's what I've said every segment we've done on this week. I think there's value in giving Jaden it a little bit more early in the game, even if it in the vacuum of that one possession, it's not your most profitable thing. This is, I think, what you would get out of that will have an existential impact on the entire 48 minutes of the game or the final 23 games of the season. So we'll see. It's something absolutely worth tracking and talking about and thinking about through the rest of the year, as is everything. This is what you do when you're one of the best teams in the NBA.
I believe Jaden McDaniels is this team's Michael Porter Jr. And I think the Nuggets won the title, and not by style of play by any means, but Michael Porter Jr. is an offensive weapon, and it sometimes borderline a defensive liability. And the reason the Nuggets won the title last year was not just because Jokic was the best player in the league. They're one. And Murray was the perfect sidekick. They're two. Right. And that Bruce Brown and KCP and Aaron Gordon filled those defensive roles. They're 3-4. But it's because Michael Porter Jr. played some of his best basketball on top of 1, 2, 3, and 4
best
all
defensive
clicking.
Basketball.
Yes, best defensive basketball, right? So the inverse of that is that Jaden's defense is always going to be there. Even when it slips a little bit, it's like what you said. It slipped a little bit. Oh, my God, he's still top 20 in the league. Michael Porter Jr. is always going to be an offensive threat. But if he can get his defense to crank up a notch or two, they're scary. And that's what Jaden needs to figure out on the offensive end. The contract stuff will handle itself down the road, you know. He's 269th highest paid player this year, and he's 72 in the Ringer rankings, right? Carl is going to get probably the top 10 player in pay, salary next year when he gets up to $70 million. He's going to have to go from 27th in the Ringer rankings. He's going to have to be a top 15 guy.
If he's going to be the highest paid player in the NBA next year.
Then he's going to have to be better than the 27th. Like all these guys are going to get pay raises and more expectations. But for this season, they need Jaden McDaniels on offense to do what Michael Porter Jr. did on defense. And if that does click come mid-April, there are very few teams in the West outside of the defending champs that can slow them down.
He's Kyle Teige. You can listen to him and Phil Mackey and Jim Peterson on Flagrant House. They recorded that on Thursday, I believe. You can check that out, obviously. And Kyle's a great Twitter follow as well at Kyle Teige. I'm sure you're all already following him. Kyle, appreciate you making this happen today.
Appreciate you. We're doing this next week? Yeah, you'll have a schedule next week, I'm sure. Tweet it out.
Yeah, well, I'm going to Indiana and Cleveland, so I think maybe you and I will go right before that. That's Thursday and Friday, so
cool.
It'll be quick turnaround for Kyle. No, we're back in each other's lives.
I know. It's Monday with Chris though. Recap.
Yeah, yep.
Kings
after
Clippers.
Kings Clippers. Jason and I will go Tuesday after the Blazers game, and then I think maybe me and you on Wednesday. We'll figure it out as we go.
23 games left. Not a lot. It's going to be playoff time before you know it. So enjoy the warm weather. I know you guys have had a nice early spring, and enjoy these games. Jim said it last night, or when we did pod yesterday. He has never had more fun being at Target Center, and he doesn't even have the great seats anymore, right? He's not even courtside. He's up in the 200 level, but Target Center looks, even that Grizzlies game again, when this thing is clicking, it is the coolest place to be, and I know you think the same, and that's kind of your office. And you're like, I like going to the office. So shout out to everyone that keeps doing that, and shout out to everyone that sponsors the pod and supports the pod, and we'll do it again next week.
Chris and I will be back on Monday to recap Kings and Clippers. No episodes over the weekend. Until then, he's Kyle. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.